Welcome to the Becoming Evergreen Podcast, a podcast for leaders who long to grow deeply, live purposefully, and lead from a place of rest. I'm Carissa Fleming.
And I am Debbie Brunet, and we are your hosts. Our goal is to create spaces where leaders can thrive in any season, rooted, resilient, and becoming evergreen. Welcome to the Becoming Evergreen Podcast. I'm Debbie. I've got Carissa here as well. We are going to be talking about seasons today and how to form those habits in light of your current season, which always makes me think of Trader Joe's. I don't know if you've walked through at any particular season, you're like, how many chocolate things can I find? So like this is a chocolate peppermint mix I got back in December and still have, but I don't know when I'm going to bake it because right now it's kind of hot and maybe not the right season. However,
Maybe like bake it and put it in the freezer and make like the little balls. You could actually do like the little, I don't know.
No, because you can do the cookies out of this one. This is the one where you can do
cookies out of it.
Yeah, like loaf pan or that. I could do the cookies and then freeze them. That's a good idea. But Carissa, you said you had this one too. It's like the Hawaiian-inspired mochi cake. This is one I got in this season that sounds super tasty. That's coconut forward and mochi with a rice flour, I think. So nice.
Yeah, I
and
haven't
chewy.
tried it yet.
I'm excited, but that was one from this season. What do you think? Trader Joe's, like as you walk through, what's your like go-to thing to grab during a season?
Well, it's funny. I bought the guava. They had some sort of guava jam next to it, and I like tried the guava, and I didn't necessarily love it. But I when I think about seasons at Trader Joe's, I think about the flowers actually and what the foliage is, and I just love it when it's spring and there's daffodils. And they have the tiny little bunches, and they're so cute, and they look cute in little jars around the house. So that's one of my favorite things when I think about seasons at Trader Joe's.
Well, and it's funny, you know, the different candles that they have. I have a friend, which I forget, it's like the balsam one, the one that smells like a Christmas tree. She will buy like 20 of them because she loves it so much, and she burns them all December. Like they're constantly going in the house. And then it's funny, I was actually burning them the other day. I have that same flavor. I was like, this feels a little like, I mean, I live in a forest, so maybe it's appropriate, but I'm like trying to burn it so that way I can move on to my next candle, which sounds ridiculous.
It's actually funny that you brought that up because I pulled out a candle and I was thinking, am I going to light this candle this morning? And I smelled it and it's like a mulled spice. I'm like, actually, that smells so good, but I'm not sure I want it right now. Like, it's definitely time. You know, I know it's March and some places in the country are freezing. However, in Southern California, where I live currently, we have had 90-degree weather, and it is like, you know, national news, obviously, that this is like some of the hottest season. And by the time you listen to this recording, I'm hoping that we'll be back to like a normal kind of spring feel, but it has felt like summer. So I'm like, summer smells.
I was like, we might be in June gloom by then, where it might be like, March is like crazy hot. And then we're wearing sweaters in the middle of June, which is often what happens. So I'm like crossing my fingers. That's what's happening. But yeah, I'm about there with you. We've been 80 and I haven't known what to do where it's like, oh, we didn't even have spring. We're just immediately in summer, which I'm okay with. So we are talking about seasons. And again, you've got connotations that come to mind. But the way that we see that used in scripture is that the Lord set up in Genesis 1 the idea of seasons using the sun and the moon. So we talk about letting there be light, separating the day and night. So there's just, in the natural world, there are naturally seasons. And then he uses the analogy of a tree bearing fruit in its season in Psalm 1:3, which if you think about the life cycle of a tree that's not an evergreen tree, there's a season where the leaves fall and then when the fruit bears. And so we talk about like not yelling at the fruit. It might be a season where you're in winter, or it might be a season where you're in the middle of harvest. So it just depends. And then good old King Solomon in Ecclesiastes talks about the meaning of life. And one of the conclusions he comes to at the end of his life is that there is a time for everything, a time to be born, a time to die, time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, just the rhythm of life involving these different seasons. It's not just a nice idea. It's one of the ways the world is set up to work in creation. So how much more true is that in our lives as humans? And you see Jesus modeling this with his life. As you see, he was just doing normal life, being raised as a Jewish man for 30 years and then launched into his 3-year ministry. And within that ministry, he had moments of withdrawal. He had moments of ministry, of entering in and pulling back. So we're going to be talking about that. What are you wanting to grow in this season? What is the season about? And then how are you wired? How does that play into it? And then what habits are working? We'll talk a little bit about our own stories. So, Carissa, what do you see with this when we talk about the word desire, which is an interesting word? What comes to mind?
Yeah. So there's a couple different, when you think about desires, there's first order desires and there's second order desires. The first order are the impulses, the cravings, things we feel like in that moment. There's complicated relationships with food. And how you taste something or, what you want in that moment could mean you're deficient in something else. And so I was thinking about, I was up late working and the Trader Joe's box of, I'm sorry, not Trader Joe's, the Girl Scout box of the peanut butter cookies were speaking to me. And I went into my garage and gave into that first order desire, even though my second order desire, what I actually want is not to eat those because, I'm in my 40s and things just look different and how many cookies I have makes a difference. So when you think about those first order desires, we think about cravings, we think about impulses, what we feel in the moment. And actually, I think about my kids. I think about walking through the store with one of my youngest. It's really hard. You get constantly hit with desires and impulses and a whole psychology around what kind of things we can appeal to get people to buy. We see that in social media too, where if you look at my feed, oh my goodness, it really tells you a lot about apparently what I click on, because it is a little scary, but what to wear, what the outfit to wear is. Those first order desires. And then we think about those second order desires, the things that we want, the deeper desires that help shape who we are or who we're becoming. And when we think about second order desires, what we want, sometimes putting the phone down. So you're actually not focused on whatever that thing is. It's amazing how many times I open up my phone. I have a plan. People talk about this all the time. I have a plan. And then I click on something and there's a notification. And boy, it just kills that second order desire, actually, which was actually something good, like maybe to register my kid for a camp that I know is going to fill up. And I got completely distracted and come back to it 30 minutes later going, oh, darn, I didn't do it. Thankfully, there's still a spot. And that's just an example. But when we think about what God has called us to, we've talked about in some of our last podcasts about what the Lord has put on our heart, what our season is. We have seasonal focus, and some of us may have life missional focus, that we have taken time and really felt the Lord called us to specific things. Those would be those second order desires. So one of the questions that you might want to ask is, what do you feel like God is calling you to right now? Is he inviting you to grow in an area? And that would be more of that desire. 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, "For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal." And so when I think about those things that are seen, they matter, but actually the things that matter are the things that are eternal. And so that's what we're here talking about, is how to, I guess, bridge the gap between both of them. So transformation is possible. It happens through truth, habits, community, when we train our minds, when we train our bodies, through reading scripture, daily habits. We're going to talk about all of those. Debbie, what are some of those first order versus second order desires for you that actually can make an impact? And do you accomplish that second order desire?
Yeah, which I know we talked about food, we talk about fitness. I think I've been watching this play out, and I'll talk about this more, but with my morning quiet times and morning routines, is that when you first wake up, you may not feel at all like getting up. You might just feel really tired or dehydrated. But I'd started doing my quiet times on my deck, and I'm surrounded by trees. And there's just been a lot of life happening when I've been able to do that. I'm able to quiet my mind. Because one of the things that I really want is I just want a lot more peace in my thought life. I don't typically struggle with anxiety, but I've had more anxiety in the last few months. And so when I do and I see the fruit of it, I want that thing more. That's the actual thing I want, which is connection with the Lord and awareness of what's going on. But in that first moment, I still had to battle the moment of wanting to get out of bed and lose that extra hour of sleep. And so that is just a very real daily choice. And some days if you're sick or things like that, you'll let yourself off the hook. And some days you do it well, some days you don't. But that's been just a constant one for me in this season.
Yeah, and I would say training, right? We're going to talk about habits, but how we get to those desires, those second order desires really do depend on those habits. So you're talking about making a daily habit of getting up. And obviously all have different seasons, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. But we all have different seasons and how we get there. But I know for a fact, like I went for a jog yesterday and I ran a half marathon a few months ago. And I can tell I have not been running since then because it hurt. I haven't been training, but a few months ago, actually, like going out and doing that jog, it would have been nothing because I've been training for it and I created a habit to get there. So, as we talk about those desires, they are also impacted by how we're wired, and how we're wired impacts our habits too. So, Debbie, can you talk about wiring, temperament? I know we're all created differently, but would love to know a little bit more about how you're wired and how that impacts some of these practices.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about temperament and personality, there's so many different assessments out there, whether it be Working Genius or Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram. But let's just think about it very simply today. I'll use some of the four main temperaments that Hippocrates wrote about. He's the one that wrote Hippocratic Oath. But talking about four main temperaments that are kind of oriented around two key questions on the quadrant, which is, are you more people oriented or more task oriented? And are you more direct or more indirect with your decision making? So that might be the first question. And so, for example, how that might play out is one of the temperaments of somebody that's a little bit more relational, where they're more indirect and they're people oriented. They might be your people who are your counselors, wonderful listeners who are super diplomatic. They might need something that pulls them to action or to engage their society in a different way. Or you might have somebody who's really analytical, which I always think of my dad with that one, who is a learner, loves to take in information, study comes easily. But for him, it's taking those moments to either engage people in like an accountability group or small group type of thing, or something that's integrating his head and his heart. And it might be things that are prayer walks or journaling or things like that. But yeah, or like somebody who's a very driven leader who is very action oriented. It might be things that are more reflective or more worshipful. Like, so it could be with people or not, but just things that pull them from whatever they naturally do well to help shore up the things that's not as natural. Or for me, I'm an expressive. And so we need grounding, that I try to do it all and I don't always slow when I should. And so sometimes it's around rest or Sabbath or journaling to make sure I'm integrating my head and my heart, or taking moments of pause, or like I talked about, I'm trying to shore up my morning routines to make sure they're reflective. Because here's what happens when I don't. I get into task mode too fast, and then I function with a whole lot of cortisol in my system versus on the peace of God, guarding my heart and my mind. So it's a trade-off. It's worth it. So it's not really about boxing you in. Those are just really simple temperament frameworks. But again, it could just be a key question like introvert or extrovert or head or heart, about what are you naturally inclined towards and what's the thing that you might need in this season to help shore you up. What do you think about temperament, Carissa?
I was thinking a few things. I know for me, journaling has been a great practice in terms of my temperament, maybe more of a amiable, kind of relational type of person. And it helps me focus. What am I actually praying for? Because I think I can get in my head. My head definitely can get in my head. Even my prayer times can sometimes be disjointed. And so taking the moment to write down what it is I'm trying to actually pray for. It really helps focus me. Another thing that I was thinking about too, in terms of knowing that I'm more of an introvert, has helped me know, oh, there's seasons where I actually need people and I actually need to invite them in. And I have this bad habit of trying to do it myself, and it doesn't usually work, or, it doesn't work as well as it could when you invite others in. And so taking time to invite people into these moments or into a season of, whether it's a life group, whether it's a growth group, or whether it's a friend, hey, I need to go take a walk once a week and we can talk about our goals. We can talk about what we're trying to do. I would say that has made a big impact on whether I've been able to even set realistic goals and work towards accomplishing them.
Is it like task doing it by yourself, or like relational, emotional doing it by yourself that you were talking about? I'm just curious.
I would say as a single parent, single mom for a long
Yeah.
time, I'm not anymore, but there was just a real season of, yes, I did it all by myself. And even, different seasons, even in married seasons or other seasons, you can definitely still have to do task things on your own. However, when you're not supported in community, you can really feel all alone. And I would say there's been a big difference in my life being married or unmarried where allowing people in to those processes. And sometimes it is, yes, calling someone and saying, I could really use some help. During 2020, the pandemic, I was working full time and I had a friend offer, she was a teacher, but she was a teacher for homeschools. And so she offered, hey, I can come in and help you with your kids. I'm going to teach them some of the material that they're working on because I know that this is really crazy. I was working from home and trying to do homeschool. And it was crazy. And so I just so appreciated her, being willing and me actually having to say, yes, please come in. This is awkward. And it's my, all the things that when you have someone over, you want it to be clean, you want it to be perfect. And that's not always reality. Yeah, I was thinking about what a blessing that was to be able to accept the help too. So both.
So as we think about our season and setting habits, talk us through this, Carissa. How has this worked for you? I know we've done a lot of work around identifying goals too in the season. Talk us through this process.
Yeah, I mean, I love goals. I get super excited about making them. Learning how to keep them is difficult. I think I've talked in the past about when you have your whole life organized and planned for you, like I did in college, translating that into real life when we have pressures and interruptions can be difficult. I would say bringing community in again with those habits can really help. One of my goals for this year, for 2026, has actually been to finish the books that I've started. I've got so many good books that I've started, and finishing them has not always been easy. So, setting goals for myself around like finishing the book, well, how do I actually do that? One of the ways is to do it with people. So, I'm currently getting together with a couple different ladies, and we're finishing one of the books that I set out to start, and they're excited to read it too. So that's one of the ways I've brought in community with that habit.
Yeah.
But I would say that, again, a habit is something that you set and then you do, and you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. Uh, in athletics or in life, we do this repetition, and I'm not going to demonstrate my passing for you, but I can't tell you how many times I've thought about just this tiny degree of an angle in my arms and how just turning it slightly makes a huge impact on whether or not I was able to execute my goal, which would have been passing the ball to the target. Just that tiny switch. But I had to do it over and over and over again to be able to make that happen. And again, sometimes we have things that are thrown at us that make it more difficult to accomplish that. So you talked about sitting out on your deck and reading your Bible. For me, it's getting up early also and reading my Bible. But what happens when kids stay up late? How do you still maintain those habits in the midst of, I want to say, chaos? What about you?
Well, I was just thinking about what you were saying. I'll answer that, but I just think about one of the things that always marked Jesus' life is that he was interruptible. Like he had these rhythms, but also it's like most of those stories of ministry happened while he was on the way to do something else. And so I love that comment too about making sure we have our habits and have our plans, but that we stay interruptible, where we're not so married to the plan that we don't miss opportunities to minister to your teenager. And it's like the discernment to know when it's an interruption that is good and when it's like a distraction. That's a whole other conversation. But I think for me, beginning of the year, I will often sit down and do goals. This year, there's one specific one that came to mind when we were talking about this I've been experiencing a little bit more anxiety this year. And Dallas Willard is quoted as talking about how do you think what do you think he would be like if you were around him? And he used the phrase relaxed. I was like, somebody who just wasn't encumbered by anxiety. And I know anxiety is a very hot topic right now, but just some of the byproducts of the amount of time we're on devices and things like that can be anxiety along with post-COVID. Whole topic. But for me, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety. And I'm like, I really want to be a person who's marked by peace. And that fed into, I actually, speaking of technology, spent some time on AI thinking through, okay, I've got sometimes when I'm traveling and sometimes when I'm at home, help me think through a morning routine that helps me manage stress and gives me time in the word. And so it was very key to like get outside pretty quickly. And then for me, it was like doing my quiet time outside, which I think helps with the circadian rhythm and waking yourself up, hydrating right away, as well as getting some of that reflection time, even if it was 10 minutes, along with sometimes I would mix it up and then go on a prayer walk. I use the app Lectio 365, which is you're listening to scripture and then it's repeating it. I talked about wanting that sort of meditative piece helps a lot. But I'm not always doing it perfectly. I feel like about half the time I was staying up too late or wasn't eating well the day before. And so then I was waking up feeling really sluggish. And so it was just this whole thing of figuring that out. I'm like, that's my goal. But sometimes you have to back up of like, okay, what's hindering the goal? So yeah, what is that about that like for you? Is like you have a goal. Has there been a specific thing you talked about Bible reading? Is there anything else in this season that's kind of been part of your hope for this year?
So many things. Like I said, I love goals.
Yeah.
But as you were talking, I was thinking a little bit about some of those, I would say 3 questions that are worth asking. Does this habit that I'm wanting to establish, does it fit my life right now? Does this align with what God is doing? And is it life-giving or draining? And I was thinking a little bit about the idea that sometimes the things, when we go back to that first order desire, sometimes the things that hold us back from achieving from achieving or to actually be able to even start to even want to develop a habit can be based on some things like limiting beliefs. It can be based on sin, some of these things that hold us back from actually working to accomplish these habits. Sin, maybe it's gluttony, or maybe it's I'm not relying. One of the things I've noticed in my life is, again, I talked a little bit about wanting to do it all myself. Well, what happens when I don't rely on Jesus? I try and find something else, whether it's Netflix or maybe it's drinking too much wine or you name it. Maybe it's going out. I was thinking about some of the destructive things that we could do in our life that could actually make it impossible to get up early. Are you staying up late watching shows? Or I don't know. I'm just throwing some examples out there, but I think taking time, if you really want to accomplish something, submitting yourself before the Lord, open hands, Lord, what do you want from me in this season? And if I'm feeling drained when I'm trying to do this, is it really within what God wants for me in this season? Maybe me practicing, I'm just using the running, we keep using the running scenario as an example, but maybe my knees are really bothering me. So, what is it that I need to do differently so that I can run the race that the Lord set before me? Strength training or stretching or rest. And again, these all go back to some of those daily spiritual rhythms we're talking about. We're talking about in physical realm, but oftentimes we're really talking about the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
So, Debbie, in your life, as we're not quite done yet, but as we're getting ready to close, I think about the fun things that we do, whether it's your face care routine, talking about social media, how many times do we see like, this is my skincare routine and I do it every night. But what's a life-giving thing that is a habit in your life that makes a difference?
Oh goodness. I'm trying to think because a lot of my routines with like fitness, I'm realizing I'm very socially motivated, which is no shock to anyone. And so something that's been very life-giving is that I will show up at something that is fitness based if there's people there. And so I just booked a trip to Banff for the summer, which will be a backpacking trip. And I noticed as soon as I booked that trip, which is much less intense than the last one I did, and it's more flat, I immediately started doing more hikes. And I was like, just my intrinsic motivation to do it. And it's not that I'm necessarily always doing it with people. It's that I don't want to be the weak link in the back who is not able to keep up. And so I was setting up more hikes with people and making sure they had hills, which then meant I was getting more endorphins, which was helping my stress reduce, which then I slept better. And then I woke up to my quiet time. I was like, whoa, that life dominoes into more life, which is really cool. And so that was fitness based, but it ended up dominoing into my quiet time also, because it helped with some of the other stress stuff. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing. And Banff sounds wonderful. I would love to get to go see it one of these days. We're both going to be traveling around the same time period, so I can't go, but I'm excited for you to see the beautiful blue there.
Yeah. Tropical glacial lakes, can't go wrong.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. Anything in this season? I know you've already talked about it, but anything fun?
Oh, anything fun. Well, this is not fun, but I would say sometimes my best ideas come while I'm sitting in church listening. I think it's kind of like people talk about like being in the shower, right? Sometimes you get your best ideas when you're actually like you're not doing anything, you're not distracted, you're not looking at your phone, you name it. And so I think that laundry is one of the things that can just become a giant mountain. And then I have kids who are like, Mom, why do I have this? And I'm like, well, did you do your laundry? Oh, wait, you're 6 or 7. Maybe I should still help you. But recently I signed laundry days, and it's okay if it's not perfect, but I just know, okay, Tuesday's so-and-so's days. Wednesday is my husband's day. And like at least 2 of those days they're the same people's because they have a lot of it. And so that's one of the habits that I have started recently that is, I think, just even mentally, even if it's not changing the laundry pile, it's almost like a mental decompression where I don't have to think about it. And so I think James Clear talks about this too. When we go from doing something repetitively over and over, you don't have to think about it as much. And that's when you know it's become a habit. And so I'm excited about the laundry days becoming more of a habit. And I think getting outside and training and doing some hiking as just a fun thing, but it's something you're not even thinking about as much because it's just part of your daily rhythm, makes a big difference.
Well, and I can also say, this sounds really silly, and I almost said this, but I was thinking of sourdough. Because you brought me sourdough. And there's something about, like, it's kind of almost like a day-and-a-half process to the rhythm of keeping an eye on the bread and the growth. And I feel like it's been really fun to like host people with fresh sourdough. And that's been a habit where like at first when you gave me the recipe, I was like, ooh, this is like daunting. But it actually wasn't that daunting. And then now I've been trying to explain it to another friend where she's feeling daunted. I was like, oh, like I've kind of got it down. I don't have to look at the recipe. It's in my head. It doesn't feel daunting now because I've done it now probably about 12 times since you gave me the recipe. And that just speaks to how it works, this like giant recipe. But I'm like, oh, really? That just takes like 10 minutes to do that. So
yes. I love that you're doing it. And I would say that pretty soon, or maybe already, your bread is already better than mine because you're such an amazing baker, cooker, all your food I love.
Starting to add things to it, like garlic and rosemary I just did. And then I did one with raspberry chipotle, goat cheese, and rosemary. And those were both pretty great. So
that is amazing. Well, I am so grateful again to be doing life with you and talking about habits. And again, as you're listening to this episode, take a moment. I would recommend journal, sit down with a piece of paper, or even if you're a verbal processor with your voice recording memo, and record what is your season? What is the Lord calling you to within this season? And what's one thing that you can do today that is going to help make an impact and help you get in that direction? And who are you going to tell about it?
Love. And just prayer for us is that the Lord would help us recognize the season we're in and give us the wisdom to build the rhythms that align with it. And I think you're going to see a lot of life that comes from that. So we're excited for ourselves. We're excited for you. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast of Becoming Evergreen. Have a wonderful week.
Hey, it's Carissa here. Thanks so much for listening. And before we go, I want to tell you about something that I am super excited about. The Fall 2026 Becoming Evergreen Retreat is happening October 23rd through 25th at Mount Hermon Conference Center near Santa Cruz, California, nestled in the Redwoods. It's amazing, and we want you to be there with us. So come, bring your team, your life group, or a friend, and join us in the Redwoods. Register at becomingevergreen.com.